took 7 years. The first time I made 6 figures. And the second time it took like 7 months. That's what I always say.
Hello, Dr. Ashley. Thank you very much for joining us today. Well, I'm so excited to be speaking with you.
I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Your story is so cool because a lot of people have, would expect to go through kind of what you went through once maybe in their lives, hopefully never, but you've not just gone through it once, but you've gone through it twice and you've kind of skyrocketed it each time. So I just want to start by letting you kind of take the floor, tell us a little bit about your background, like how you got into the position you're in now and what you're doing.
I guess I'll start where I am and then we'll backtrack so everyone has context. So currently I work in global human resources development here in Japan. So I'm located in Hamamatsu, Japan, and I love my job. It's amazing. And I always tell people this is my second dream job. And the reason why this is so important is because that's been my journey all of these years is this, I don't want to say struggle, but the highs and lows of working in corporate America, unemployment, and kind of that experience. So I always say it started way back in college, right? So I always tell everybody I'm a recession baby, right? And what that means is I graduated like right before the Great Recession. So all the indicators had started showing that the recession was coming. But I had done everything that I was taught to do, right? They say you go to school, get a good job, don't major in anything crazy. I was a business administration, major. I tried to do accounting. That did not work out for me. So we defaulted over to marketing. I got the corporate internship. So I had like 3 corporate like brands on my resume. So I had the experience and I graduated and there was like no one, like womp womp, like there was like no one that was interested in talking to me. All the positions that I had previously worked while I was in college no longer were interested because they said I was overqualified. And then all of the entry-level positions I was applying for said I had needed 3 to 5 years of experience, but I had just graduated college. So I was underqualified. So I was in this catch-22 where I was like, but I did everything they told me to do and it did not work. So I found myself just frustrated, disheartened. I had saved money because they told you have an emergency fund. So at the time I had saved, 3 months of living expenses, I think 36 months of living expenses at the time, but I was running out of money, right? I was paying for everything and it was fine, but it got to the point where I was on my last month and I kind of called home to my mom. And I'm from a very small town in South Carolina, like on a dirt road. And I was not trying to go back. I had done so much to get ahead because I was in Charlotte, North Carolina, or outside at the time. And I just remember calling her bawling, just like in tears, just like, come to Jesus, like, oh my gosh, life is over. I can't believe, and it wasn't like I was crying because I was scared or nervous. I was embarrassed. I was frustrated. I was overwhelmed. Like I did what everyone told me to do and it still wasn't working. So what do you do when everything, the traditional advice doesn't work? Like, what do you do? So my mom, like, she did the mommy thing is what I say. She said, calm down. It's going to be okay. And she said, listen, I'll give you a 30-day extension. She was like, I know you have everything to figure out. Cause I told her I had enough money to pay the next month rent. So she gave me what I call a 30-day extension, which is what I feel like is my lifeline. And in those 30 days, I cried more. I screamed, I walked around the block a couple of times. And in those 30 days, I was able to get into grad school and find an internship, and all those things landed to my first full-time position.
That must have taken a heavy toll, especially as a new grad, thinking that, hey, I've got this stuff covered because I've got good brands on my CV. Like I have stuff, like I'm sorted. So how did you get through that? I know you mentioned a few times you cried, but how did you get over that?
To be honest, I didn't cry probably as much as I needed to because I didn't have the time. Like I had 30 days to figure something out. So the interesting thing, and this is actually what I work on with my clients now in the career space, is no one ever talked to me around the emotions of jobs. They always talk about resumes. They always talk about cover letters, presenting yourself well, scrubbing your social media to make sure there's nothing crazy. Well, that's back in the day, right? They don't care now, but scrubbing your social media, when Facebook was still new and MySpace was, a thing, scrubbing all that. They told you all the things to do from the tactical part and the strategy, but they didn't talk about how the rejection emails made you feel when it happened. You getting 3 or 4 rejection emails a day, right? They're not talking to you about like the hit to your self-esteem and like the confidence that you lose because you know you're qualified. But if you hear no so many times, you stop feeling qualified, right? You stop believing the information that's in front of you because all you see is the negative, right? So for me, I don't think, to be honest, I dealt with the emotions part as I should have looking back. I lost a couple of friends because I wasn't answering the phone. Like I was secluded. I was like, listen, don't nobody understand this but me. Y'all have jobs. Y'all are in your own space. I need to figure out what my life looks like. So for me, the answer, at least one of the answers, was action. I was just taking action. I said, okay, this was what I was doing wasn't working. So I undid everything I was learning. I was like, okay, I put on my marketing hat, right? I was like, if I was marketing myself, what would someone need to see and what would I need to say, right? But that's not what they was teaching. That's not what they were teaching at the time, right? And then where would I need to be for people to find me, right? So then I started like, changing my resume. And then I started like putting myself different places. So I kind of created like my own little action plan to jumpstart.
But tell me that you got this job at HR. That was your first kind of leg into corporate America. But you did really well there, didn't you? You didn't just dabble. Like your action kind of continued there. So tell me what happened.
So I first started, I was doing like admin, sales analysis stuff, like not anything super exciting. And then I graduated with my MBA and I was like, it's time for something different. So then I kind of popped over into human resources, right, which I hated in college. So it's amazing that I'm here because I thought it was like the worst subject next to quantitative methods I could ever experience. It was just boring. But when you do it in real life, it's different, right? It's a different type of animal. So then I was in recruitment. So I was a happy career fair lady, which is fun because everyone loves you, right? Everyone wants to talk to you and things like that. So it was great. And from that experience, I was able to make a couple of leaps. And one of the leaps that you're referring to was working for Mercedes-Benz. And then eventually making six figures there. So obviously it took 7 years. The first time I made six figures. And the second time it took like 7 months. That's what I always say.
Madness, right? So, I mean, two things super important there. Like one was the grit, the level of effort that that it took to get to that first six figures. Actually, three things now I think about it. The second thing that was really important for what you said was, you identified not just a niche that had requirements, but an area where you felt you could contribute a lot and it fit with your personality. You're a chatty person, you like high energy, and there's people who are able to talk to you in the recruitment space. But then the third thing is you prove that within a job, you can make six figures, right?
Totally.
So that's mad because a lot of people just think, oh, well, I can't do it. Like I'm in a job, I don't know how to get a promotion. I don't know how to identify what works with me. And you're in HR now. So talking about the difference that you see from people, who are technically very capable, but don't get promoted versus people who position themselves in a way that they can be noticed and promoted. So what's the difference there?
I love this. So you have to cut me off. I talk about this all day. Like this is what I do, right? So to go back to what you were speaking of earlier, it really is about mindset and action. Like those are the two most important things. I just had I had to be upbringing in terms of my mom. Like she's just one of those parents that she just literally said, you can be anything you want, right? And I was just crazy enough to believe her. Like that was really all it is. Some people say it, but they don't really, latch on. I latched onto it. So there wasn't really a limit for me. I felt like it was weird that I was experiencing things based on my background and based on who I knew, because I didn't go to like a top 10 business school, like all the things that are supposed to happen. I didn't do any of that, but I was able to have this amazing career. When I look back at the time, because people were asking me, how are you doing that? And I was like, I didn't have an answer because I was like, I'm just applying for jobs. That's how I felt. But I wasn't just applying for jobs. That's what it looked like, right? So on the back end, there's just a lack of people understanding career branding for themselves, right? So I always say career branding is a combination of your personal and your professional experience, right? Most people only talk about the professional and the achievements, right? If they get that far, they don't incorporate personal, right? Like there's amazing things of who I am personality-wise that you mentioned, like you kind of picked up on that I thrive really well in certain environments and not so much in others, right? But I still have those experiences. So like I worked in compliance, right? Not the funnest job, right? But really important to my field. So I have it in my back pocket if I need it, but that's not a preference. So the people that do well, right? They ask questions, they take action, and they believe, right, that they can get this position. Like they're not locked in. A lot of people, the word that I use and hear all the time is stuck. I just feel stuck, right? So I always say, take a step, right? If you take one step, whether it's good or bad, it will get you out of that space of being unstuck. But they refuse. Like most people refuse to be like, I can't do it. Like they're paralyzed with fear. And I understand, but you're okay with where you are if you're not willing to at least try.
Let's relate it back to how you were talking about, the second time you made your 6 figures. That was in 7 months. So, but what happened between your Mercedes-Benz job and you're hitting 100K, and then, what triggered the events that led you to move to Japan?
I remember being in my position and sitting in my office. This is my first time having my own office in California at the time, in Los Angeles, and floor to ceiling office. It's like a conference room they had converted so I could have an office. And I remember looking out the window and like bursting into tears, like literally like in the office. Luckily, thankfully, no one was there because that would have been horrific. And I realized that the life that I had built wasn't a life that I wanted, right? So I made this 6 figures, but I was super far away from my family and I hadn't created like a friend group in that place. And just everything around what I was doing just wasn't a match for me. And then like a series of events happens. And then I ended up moving back home and that's okay. I'm going to try like entrepreneurship stuff. Right. And then that didn't work out. And then I worked again and then I got fired, and I actually deserved to be fired. I tell people all the time because I wasn't showing up for the job because I was making half them. I was making like $50,000 or $60,000. Right. Which people love to make. But for me, it was half of what I made before. So I was like, I wasn't interested in the work. So I stopped showing up the way I should have. Right. So all these series of events, I found myself unemployed. I'm like, holy crap, I work in HR, I know how to do resumes, right? Like I'm doing all this stuff, but I was back at home with my mom, back in South Carolina, like all the things I was trying to avoid the first time. And during that time, I kind of just looked in the mirror and said, like, you have no one to blame but yourself. Like I really just took a look in the mirror and just took full, total responsibility. Right. And while that was happening, I was experiencing all these other things as a result of my job loss that most people don't talk about. So because I didn't have a job, I didn't have a bank account. So my bank account got closed because overdraft fees, and like they're not only going to keep it open for so long, but there's no money in it. So that was happening. I had bought a house and my house was going into foreclosure. I started getting notices and people were coming, coming to, give the notices to say, hey, we're going to take your property, and things like that was happening. I was trying to work with the bank and I was calling them, and sometimes they worked with me, sometimes they wouldn't, but it had been so long, I got it. I had family members in the hospital. So it seemed like all of life had converged all at one time, if that makes sense. And no one talked to you about that. I remember this sitting on the bed. Like I can remember it like it was yesterday. I sat on my bed and I said, you know what? I don't know what's happening to my life, but this isn't my life. Like this isn't okay. I'll take full responsibility for my mistakes, but this isn't what God has for me, right? Like this can't be. And I remember just deciding that this wasn't my life. So it sounds weird, but I rejected everything I saw physically in front of me. And then I kind of sat down and said, okay, if I could start over, right? If God could come down and say, hey, baby girl, I give you 3 things. What do you want? Right? I said, these are the 3 things I want. I said, I want to make 6 figures again. I said, I want to work in human resources development. Right. And he asked me where I wanted to work. And I said, I'll work anywhere in the world. That's what I said. Those are 3 requirements I had for my next position. And I was only willing to apply for positions or talk to people if those 3 things were happening. If you call me for anything else, I was not interested, which is really crazy because I didn't have any money. I didn't have a bank account, but I was just committed. It's like, no, this is what I want. And about, I'll say, 2 weeks after I did that work, and that work happened within like 3 days. It wasn't like a very long time. It was like a 3-day process. Like I think a week or 2 within me doing that, I think I saw the job for the job I have now and I applied. And then like they waited a couple times and they emailed me back that said, hey, do you know this job is in Japan? And I was like, yeah, that's fine. Because in my mind, I have to be honest, I wasn't expecting to get the job. I just wanted to talk to the recruiter to see what the other jobs they had here in America. Well, they're in America at the time. That was the goal. I didn't really want, this job seemed cool, but for me at the time, I was undervaluing myself. I just didn't think I was qualified for it, right? I wasn't making, I wasn't, there's no way to say it, right? And then through that process, I sent them my updated resume. And like every week after, like they still kept in communication. She was like, yeah, let's have a phone screen. So I talked to her, I thought it was like the polite thing, to do. So we spoke. She's like, yeah, I love to, continue to my hiring manager. Follow up with me next week. I've worked in HR. Like I know what the phrases are. So I was like, I don't believe this, but I'm gonna do what she said. So literally I just sent an email says, hey, this is Ashley, you told me to follow up. She's like, yeah, I want to, introduce you to my XYZ. And at the time it was the vice president of human resources. At the time, like we skipped and it was like very quick where like I was on the phone with him. He had conversations and then they were like, okay, we're going to connect you to the people in Japan. And then things just started happening like so quickly. I had to interview in Japan. So like in July, was it June or July? June or July, they flew me into Japan, my first time ever being in Japan for the interview. Like it was an incredible, it took about 7 months from me actually applying to landing physically in Japan for that process.
Wow, that's insane. I mean, you think about like what you're saying is like, you sat down and you kind of cleared out your mind. You kind of got rid of your negativity that's holding you back, all the baggage from your previous boss and previous experiences that you had. You kind of created a vision for yourself about what you want, and then you got really clear, like so crystal clear on like the 3 things that those bosses need to be ticked for me to even move. And then suddenly, within 2 weeks, that just showed up on your lap. So it probably goes back to what you were saying earlier about how once you start looking, things just pop up.
Dude, it's kind of like when you say like I'm looking for a yellow Honda, right? All of a sudden, what happens? You see all the yellow Hondas. It's the same thing, but most people, we don't think of it and use our life that way, right? Like if you look for the negative, you're going to find the negative. That's most people's default. I'm just like that annoying positive person, right? Like when the building's burning down, we're all safe. Okay, at least we're all healthy, right? So like I'm that kind of irritating positive person, but not like the fake happiness, because sometimes life sucks. Okay, like I just call a spade a spade. But you can refrain. Life can suck, but it's still worth living. So I think clarity actually brings cash and it brings value to people in a way that you can't get anywhere else. Like like with resumes, right? That's my specialty. Like people write resumes to fit every position because they don't want to miss out on any opportunities. But when you do that, you miss out on every opportunity because your resume is not catered to anyone. It's not targeted to anyone. You don't have to make 6 figures and hate your job. Like I did that the first time. So I know people are doing it, but you can make 6 figures and you can enjoy what you do and like your coworkers and kind of have that amazing culture. So that's what I'm currently doing. I have a product called Resume ATM where I help people start the process as mindset, but we start with their resume.
Or how can people get in touch with you if they're interested with that? What should they do?
So if they're interested in Resume ATM, we're really just focused on turning your resume into money. Like that's my thing, right? I'm a money girl. So if you don't want to make money with your resume, I'm not the right person to come to. I like results, right? So if you're interested in that, there and all the information is there, and they can of course sign up to that information. If they want to connect with me, you can definitely connect with me on Facebook. Facebook and LinkedIn are the most popular platforms that I'm on the most, obviously, because of what I do.
That's great. And yeah, I mean, all of your links will be down in the description as well, so people can reach out to you directly. I think that's awesome. The last question I wanted to ask you was, how can somebody starting now replicate your success? What are some of the key things you would tell somebody to do if they want to follow those kinds of footsteps?
The first thing is you have to create a positive environment. Sometimes that's difficult for you to do by yourself. So I had to fake it. And the way I faked it is I listened to Goalcast. So I would literally put Goalcast on for hours, like in the background. So like in my earphone, like if I was at the hospital, like it was just in my ear and it would be in there for like 4 hours. Like no one knows, right? So I create a positive environment to get started. Right. That's number one. Number two, you need to go ahead and take responsibility. So for whatever situation, however you got there, doesn't matter. Take responsibility for your part in it. Even if it's a big part or small part, take responsibility. Right. Once you do that, then I tell people like dare to dream again. Right. Design what you want, like write it down and be very specific. Like people sometimes label like, oh, this is good, this is bad, whatever you want. it's for you, right? Don't let anyone tell you what you want is good or bad. If you want a Lamborghini, go for it. If you want to live on the ocean side and drink margaritas, whatever, right? But once you write it down, then you have to create an action plan. And that's what I'm all about. Like, that's what I actually did, was create an action plan. Then you take action every day. And you don't have to do everything in a single day, right? But you take a little bit of action every day. Like, I wasn't applying for 50 jobs, right? I only saw like 3 that was a match, right? So which means one day I updated my resume, next day I updated my cover letter, next day I applied for the job. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was like a slow burn, not like that instant microwave, right? But it was worth it. And it didn't take long. So like, if you do it within a week, you can start seeing traction in like a week and a half, 2 weeks. Like, it doesn't have to take a long time.
Actually, it's been an absolute joy talking to you. It was a pleasure, and the amount of gold dust you've just sprinkled all over the place is amazing. So thank you so much for.
Oh, thank you so much. And, I think it's amazing that you have this platform that you're sharing, because people need this. So, continue to do your own wonderful, amazing gifts, and, we're going to change the world together,
That's it. Virtual high five. Boom.
There we go.